If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button as well as the bell to be notified of future videos. Thank you.
Hello everyone, we are back. Steve Coetzee here, South African Air Force. This is episode 2, you know, the first episode. And Steve, over to you, man. Just carry on with the story. Tell us, we're listening.
Chris, thank you very, very much. It's good to chat with you again. And yeah, very interesting career continuation, they call it. Or they say, trip over your own feet and you'll fall on your face. Well, fortunately, I've got fatter over the years and I don't fall on my face anymore. I just bounce around on my belly. But yeah, the last bit we spoke about the end of my special duty in Southwest Africa and a tour to Rundu. And the consequences of the ending of a war had its definite effect on a lot of us. I would call us really professional soldiers because that's all we were trained to do. And the biggest challenge for us was to try and readjust to not getting that adrenaline rush every year. Because our adrenaline rush was to go and face danger, do what we do what we were trained to do. And obviously it has the effects of not being able to get rid of that drug called adrenaline. A lot of marriages came to an end. There was a lot of conflict within. I know of many men that really suffered badly. But, you know, positive attitude, look forward, walk forward is what everyone mostly does. Those that can't do it alone end up looking for help. And I'll allude to this as we move on. But I thought it fit to quote a little passage that I had borrowed, which I think is very, 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 very a joking process of what we as warmongers actually feel. Our war was a very, very silent war, not advertised like the Vietnam War or the Iraq War or the Afghanistan War or the present Russian war. It was a quiet war. There was no flashing on TV screens throughout the world and showing them what we were up to. Our own people never really knew what we were up to. So, without further ado, I quote, "On my chopper, we did some of the stuff we did. We didn't do the other stuff we did, because if we did do it, it was a secret. So we didn't do it. Even though we did, but not really. The medals my fellow crewmen and I didn't earn for doing what we didn't do, we did receive, except we didn't do while we did the stuff we didn't do. While we did the stuff we didn't do, while we weren't there, not doing it. As far as what chopper I was on, we didn't go where we went and didn't do what we did while not doing it. So, the bottom line, we weren't on the chopper, that I won't mention, not doing what we did, where we weren't. Hope that clarifies things for everybody. Now, my main focus at this point in time was really to qualify as an engineer. And I completed my studies, worked diligently at it. The light of my life, little Nicole, was always around to make sure Daddy was studying and Daddy was doing this and Daddy was doing that. With her little red hair and her curly red hair, she was definitely my favorite. And I eventually completed my studies and submitted all my application for my engineering qualifications. Back at the squadron again, I assumed normal flight engineering duties, which included firefighting standby. And we were called out one weekend to a tremendous fire that was threatening the town of Greyton in the Eastern Cape. We got airborne with a Puma, 2 Pumas, and those days we had the fiberglass fire buckets, not the Bambi buckets they use today. And these were manufactured at 2A Depot, actually. And we break the fire bucket in two, take the top off, and we put them inside the aircraft and then fly them with us. So I had a ground crew chap in the cabin, sitting with the fire bucket and my toolboxes and stuff and the backup kit, because we knew we were going to spend a couple of days fighting these fires. And on our approach over the mountains, we hit a downdraft with that Puma that I thought it was going to shake the aircraft apart. I flew up in my seat. The fire bucket in the cabin was thrown up against the roof of the chopper. The poor guy sitting in the seat at the back was thrown onto the floor. And when we landed, I was really concerned. So we did a complete review of the aircraft. We checked for cracks. We checked the blades. We checked the tail boom. Because if under stress like that, the first thing that does, you'll get wrinkling in the tail boom and any other cracks that would develop. So we went through that aircraft with a fine tooth comb to make sure it was okay. Fortunately, the Puma is a very, very strong machine, and she survived. The fire bucket was damaged, but fortunately, we managed to put tape on it so it wouldn't leak, and we started assuming our firefighting duties. Firefighting in the Greyton area amongst those Rocky Mountains is not fun. And with the winds that we were facing, it was definitely a challenge. We ended up flying straight up against the cliff to throw water at the fire that was climbing up through the ravine. And as we approached the fire, if you don't release it in time, you got what they call a potential splat, because you're not going to have enough power to get out of it. But fortunately, we fought the fire, we fought it well, and managed to get it under control. The guys on the ground were awesome. We carried them from one spot to the other and made sure that they killed the embers where we'd thrown the fire. The fire controller was fantastic, and we got the whole thing under control, rescued the town. It was really, really an awesome exercise. And I was proud to be part of it. And the whole process really was my finalization as flight engineering, busy winding down now, getting ready to do my last trips, etc. Then I ended up on a night vision goggle trip on the Tafelberg, doing quite an interesting exercise. Now we'd opened the envelope on operating from ships with night vision goggles. And we managed to do cargo slinging on a very darkened ship. In other words, no lights whatsoever, and be able to do cargo slinging on and off the ship, which gave them much more opportunity and operational capabilities going forward to operate. So that was a really interesting episode. And the XO of the trip at that point in time was very interested in seeing what we were up to. Very tall and well-built Afrikaans chap. Very pleasant guy. Liked the air crew as well. And remember, XO on Tafelberg, it's going to come back and bite him in the butt. I'll explain that. Anyway, back to the squadron life, becoming hectic, etc. And then a fellow flight engineer friend of mine, Henny Stein, him and I were selected to take 2 Pumas to the helicopter competition that used to take place every so often. And this was going to be held in Bloemspruit this year. So Henny and I actually selected 2 Pumas. And the aircraft only get resprayed at major servicings if required, or if the paintwork is in really atrocious condition. So the Pumas we selected were in good condition, but the paintwork was really looking a bit suspect. So I've done a lot of spray work, rebuilding cars and stuff. I went down to the spray painters and asked them if they could give me some mix. And then at nighttime, while everyone was at home, we actually resprayed the aircraft in the hangar, and then also put the crew's name on the doors, which just gave it that extra little touch. We took off, went to Bloemfontein. and Henny and I participated in the helicopter competition. And we were doing very well, except for Paul Schumer and I. He was the commander, I was the flight engineer. We were doing the cargo sling with the chain and taking it through a zigzag pattern. And him and I seemed to have gone off pattern. I was talking in one way and he was misunderstanding the other way. In the meantime, my patterning was a little bit questionable at that point in time. And we did very poorly in that exercise. The rest of the exercises, we did fantastic. We did really well. Anyway, there's 2 prizes in the competition. One is for the flying phase and the other is for the ground crew phase. In other words, which ground crew was participating properly, etc. We were well dressed. We had wonderful clean overalls. We had names on our overalls. We had names on the aircraft. Our tooling, our special tooling and our support equipment was impeccable, because 22 Squadron and 30 Squadron at that point was did the most mobilization on board ship. So all our kit was always 100%. We didn't do too well in the flying phase. We came second or third, I'm not too sure, but we did win the ground crew phase. And a sentiment to the ground crew that were with us, did an awesome job. Really proud of them. Then back to squadron life and firefighting season once again. And very interesting story. You're going to have to censor this, I suppose. But anyway, we were doing firefighting. The mountains were in a fire right behind Simonstown. And there's a lot of houses right up against the mountain. And we came in with a bucket and we were busy flying in towards the mountain. And I looked up into a house because we were so close to the houses. And yes, this poor lady in a shower with the window wide open. And I had the most beautiful view of the sexiest thing I've seen. And I lost my breath totally. Blah, 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 blah. Interesting. We finished the firefighting, saved Simonstown. Beautiful operation by everybody. I mean, the Pumas were absolutely awesome in getting that blaze under control, and with the ground support firefighters, quenched it immediately. Another trip was being planned for us to go down south, the great Antarctic, white Antarctic. And on this trip, we had a very, very interesting operation. It was also the longest trip that we'd been down there. So we prepared the aircraft and set sail for the Antarctic in November, and made our way through. Normally takes about 12 days to get there, having to break ice because the ice is pushed up against the Antarctic and it's busy breaking away during summer. So you got to break through the ice to get to the clear water. Then you got to sail along the Antarctic ice shelf until you reach what was known as the Bukta, where we would then offload the ship and take the stuff through to Sanai, which was the main base at that point in time. On this trip, we were scheduled to do ice thickness surveys. We carried instrumentation in the aircraft with GPS, large GPS and depth finding equipment that we slung underneath the aircraft to measure the thickness of the ice. The sorties were 3 hours each, and we were rotating, trying to keep as much time going as possible. I remember very clearly where the late Russell Dupree and myself were at Grunerhogner, the mountain base, and we just couldn't get enough satellites to fly. The geologists that were operating the equipment just couldn't get enough satellites to get us going. We needed a minimum of 5 satellites. We were getting 1, 2, maybe 3. And then all of a sudden there were 5 satellites. So we dive into the aircraft and we're flying and we're flying and we're flying. And everything is going hunky-dory. So I returned, it must have been about 3 o'clock in the morning, and the sun sort of just dips on the horizon and starts going up again. Russell took over, And they were on the furthest leg, about to turn around and come back again, when the unthinkable happened. The right-hand engine's engine shaft sheared, and they had to do an emergency landing on the Antarctic plateau at 11,000 feet and a temperature of about -30, with a 20-knot wind blowing, taking the wind chill factor down way below -40. The other Puma was at Sanai, 150 nautical miles away from Grunhobna. We immediately radioed them, told them to get their butts in gear. We've got to rescue the guys. They've got limited time. They're going to freeze. Les Poseidon was at Sanai, jumped into the aircraft, tried to start it, zippo, nothing. And just couldn't get number 2 engine started. She wouldn't start, not at all. Fortunately for us, the Germans, a survey ship had 2 BO-105 helicopters, much smaller little helicopters, but they immediately responded, and they arrived with the 2 BO-105s at Sanai. And Chris Strubel, our chief pilot, then climbed on board with them, and they set sail for the plateau to go and pick up the people. They arrived at the plateau where Hotel Juliet Alpha, the other Puma, shaft had sheared, and they picked the guys up and we're going to start bringing them out. When they tried to restart the second engine of one of the BO-105s, it had burnt a bearing. So now we're down to 1 aircraft. So they kept the 1 aircraft going and they flew everybody out. And now we had to sit and lick our wounds because we had 2 aircraft stuck on the Antarctic plateau. At that point in time, we realized we were in deep doo-doo. The conditions there were killing aircraft. So we had to regroup and try and resolve the issue. A very wise decision was made that we would do no more flying, that we would retreat to Sanai base, main base itself, and await the arrival of the SA Agulhas. The SA Agulhas was busy doing surveys, etc. We contacted Silver Mine in Cape Town and told them about the dire straits we were in. And they immediately tasked the SAS Drakensberg to bring a military Puma down to Antarctica. Chris Strubel, myself, the late Tony Johnson, and Blaise Poseidon then climbed onto the SA Agulhas with Hotel India Zulu, the other Puma. Oh, I forgot the story. I have to retrace my steps. I apologize. I was flown back to Sanai to try and repair Hotel India Zulu because her engine wouldn't start, remember? And my humble apologies for going back a bit, but I promise I'll catch up for you. When I got to Sanai, I hadn't slept for quite a while. And I tried all the tricks under the sun. I tried everything I knew how to get that thing. We had what we call jipper clips. It's 2 crocodile clips, piece of wire. Tried that. I tried bypassing the fuel control unit. I tried everything I knew. And then the last resort is that you initiate start. If you get initial start, then you switch all the electrics off and just open the fuel flow to bypass everything. Still didn't work. The only option I could think of then was that there was a problem with the fuel control unit. And I got up there and I disconnected the fuel control unit. As I pulled it back, the shaft that was driving the fuel control unit, as thin as a pencil, man, this thing had sheared. So I took that shaft and I took the fuel control unit, because if I have to change the fuel control unit, then I have to do complete retesting of every damn system again. So I decided just to replace the shaft. I took the standby engine, pulled the fuel control unit off, put the new shaft in, boom, Bob Geronti, we had a Puma. So we got her going. Anyway, used India Zulu now to fly from Sinai to the Agulhas. On the Agulhas, we set sail for Bouvet Island, an active volcano in the Southern Ocean. The Drakensberg met us at Bouvet Island, where we then swapped, flew over, got another pilot on board, and we flew the J model Puma back again with the military Puma. So now we had 2 aircraft back on board, because you cannot fly one aircraft. You need to have a standby in case something goes wrong, which we proved with the Antarctic plateau problem. I have to tell you about an interesting little story on board the SA Agulhas again. Chris Struble, Steve Coetzee, Stompie Johnson, Bless Besadnat. I think there's maybe an 1.5 inch difference between the 4 of us. I've already told you about the mischief that we can get up to on the Agulhas, and Captain Billy Leith knew us well. Anyway, we're the only crew on board that are entitled to entertain ourselves in the lounge where the bar is. And after a little bit of sustenance and the necessary lifting of the arms and singing of we choppers, and all that fadango stuff that we do, we ended up doing the Zulu dance on the bar counter with our heads up against the ceiling. And there's the 4 of us dancing away. And I'm sure, Chris Struble, when you listen to this, you'll be very impressed to remember that day as well. Needless to say, it was an interesting trip back to Sinai. Back to Sinai, we then planned our recovery process. And the chief pilot at that point in time was Venter of... my mind is a sieve today. Anyway, Harvey Venter was planning how we would do the recovery. And it was decided that myself, Bless, and a couple of the ground crew would be the recovery team. Now, to be able to do an engine change on a Puma in the field, you need what we call a mobile crane, which is quite a heavy article that you've got to assemble on the side of the aircraft that you then use as a mobile crane to lift the engine off and put the other engine back on. Because of the conditions, we needed a hot air blower. That is a gas-driven system that burns diesel to make hot air. And we needed that. It's a long, heavy item. We're working at 11,000 feet. So the air is very, very thin. You can't really exude a lot of effort. Otherwise, you run out of breath. So I decided to take a turf wall. That's a come-along that you can drag the heavy stuff across the ice. We also took a parachute that we could put over the aircraft's engine while we were blowing hot air in there so that we could at least work. We also took with us one of the geologist's tents to rig so that we could put a primer stove in there to warm up so that the people could stay warm. We arrived at the plateau with poor forlorn-looking Hotel Juliet Alpha standing over there, and the BO 105 looking much the worse for wear. While I was busy offloading the hot air blower with the ground crew, we looked up and we saw India Zulu, the other Puma, all of a sudden, a white plume of smoke coming out the right-hand engine, and the flight engineer jumping out and freaking trying all sorts of tricks. Eventually, they shut down. So we thought, okay, well, that's not a problem. Let them carry on. And we unloaded the aircraft with all tools, started setting up the camp, etc., because we had a very limited time before the temperature would be unbearable that we had to get out of there. Needless to say, we started setting up, and then Willie came over and said to him, his aircraft is stuffed. He can't move it. He can't get the second engine started. It won't start. Now, Willie is probably one of the best flight engineers that I know. And if he can't start a Puma, then you know there's something seriously wrong. He had tried every trick under the sun to get that thing going. Anyway, they put the covers on, we covered the aircraft up, closed her up, and they got onto the military Puma and they returned back to Grunhogna. We immediately started working on Juliet Alpha and started doing the engine change. At that point, Bliss would spend 5 minutes up there, come down, go warm up in the tent. I'd go up for 5 minutes, work a bit, come down, and a 30-minute engine change ended up being a 3-hour engine change. We had the hot air blower blowing in underneath the parachute we'd put over, and it was still not warm enough. It was really amazingly cold. Eventually, the engine change was completed. And first thing I did was to try and start the new engine. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. She just would not start. I tried every trick under the book, nothing. Eventually, I got the left-hand engine started. She started with a little bit of difficulty. Strange thing, normally when a Puma starts up, the engine jet pipe temperature goes up to around about 500-600 degrees, maybe a little more. And then once she starts getting to self-sustaining RPM, the temperature drops down to a more normal temperature. When I got the left-hand engine started, she climbed up to around about 700 degrees, and I thought she was going to blow, but I kept her, held her there. And then all of a sudden, the temperature just fell away. I thought, oh, I've lost the engine. And she was sitting at self-sustaining RPM at just under 300 degrees. Just shows you how cold it really was. Anyway, we tried the other engine again, nothing. So Harvey was there, Harvey Fenter. I said to him, we're going to lighten the load. We're going to strip this aircraft bare, try and fly her out with one engine. So Harvey I drained a lot of fuel because we just needed to get her off the plateau. She needed about a maximum of an hour's flight. Drained a lot of fuel, took out the GPS equipment, took out all the support equipment out of the aircraft, just emptied her out completely. By this time, because she'd been up there for a long period, all the wheels were flat as well. So it's just these flappy wheels hanging there. And Harvey would take power and he'd lift her and then bounce, and then she'd fall back down again. So I said to him, I'm going to take some more fuel out. Let's see what we can do. Drain some more fuel. And Bless Poseidonite was in the aircraft with Harvey, so the two of them would fly the aircraft out. He pulled power again. And Harvey is an amazing pilot. He's been on various situations where he's managed to pull it through. And he pulled her up in the air. And instead of sitting on a ground cushion because he knew he was going to fall off her, he actually just bounced the nose. Bounced the nose, and she took flight and off she went. I tell you, what an elated feeling. What an elated feeling. Well, now, what do we got now? Well, we got another J model standing there. What the heck do I do now? So anyway, Martin Lowe, Sloot, looks just like Sloot from the series. Martin Lowe comes up, he says to me, Steve, what are we going to do? I said to him, I've got a trick. It's an old trick. Let me try it. So I'm looking up and I start number one engine. She starts up fine, sluggy, but she goes. And I start number two engine, but as I start her, I slap all the electrics off to bypass the system and I force her. And Sloot points to the JPT. He says, 800 degrees. I said to him, I don't care. And all of a sudden, the jet pipe temperature just falls away. So I thought I'd lost the engine. In the meantime, she stabilized at under 300 degrees. Bam, fuel flows open. Off we go back to Grunhogna. Everybody piles into the aircraft. And we get back there and old Bless comes running and he tackles me. He's so happy, the two of us rolling in the ice. Well, that's not the end of it because the BO-105 is still pretty lonely up there. We've got to go and fetch this lady. It's the German BO-105 aircraft, and the Drakensberg had brought down a police pilot, and two of their technicians, and the three of them, myself, and two of the ground crew went back again the next day to go and recover the BO 105. Needless to say, same scenario. Those guys battled. I've worked on the BO 105 as well in the police force, as you guys remember in the first version. So I gave as much advice as what I could and helped where I could to get the thing going. And eventually, we got it going. And it was nip and tuck because the temperature was starting to dip very, very dangerously. Got her going and off she went. So the pilot and the one tech flew back and we broke down camp. And JC Krichler was coming to fetch us with a military Puma. And we saw him in the distance. I was in radio contact with him. I said to him, okay, fine, we're ready. We're packing up. We're breaking the tent down. You guys have us visual. No, we can't see you. So I thought, oh, shit, I'm not going to go and frickin' put the tent up again. So I said to him, well, look, we can see you. I'll talk you in. So I'm busy pattering him, giving him direction, etc., etc. They fly a wide circuit. In the meantime, they were teasing us, the bastards. I nearly killed him because we were freaking dying of cold. I mean, it was really, really extreme conditions. You know, I had frostbite on my ear. You still see a little cut over here. And it was not a pleasant scenario. Anyway, they eventually landed with a Puma. We all dived in. Now we had to put the hot air blower in. Now, flying back in the rear of a Puma with a hot air blower, you have to open the doors because it's hanging out on either side. So you can imagine how cold it was all the way back to Grunhogna. Got back to Grunhogna, packed up, went straight back to the ship and landed on board the ship. And the guy said, look, your kit's in the cabin. We've already placed everything. Go and have a sleep. I was so exhausted. I didn't even hear the ship final loading, etc. I slept 10 hours straight. 10 hours straight. When I woke up again, we were already at sea and we were on our way back home. So that was quite an interesting sortie. And we'll get back to that a little later on. We did, on the way back, do a lot of detour. We went via the South Sandwich Islands to drop off weather buoys, etc. And it's also because the SA Gullis is the icebreaker. It's a flat bottom boat. With the sea state during that time of the year being the longest trip as well, we'd had about 5-6 hours of nighttime down in the Antarctic already. And beautiful, beautiful sight. If you've ever seen the Northern Lights, you haven't seen the Southern Lights. Absolutely amazing, man. You're watching these aurora all over the place. I actually tried to take a photograph with my Pentax 500, 35mm. Got all set up. Go to press the shutter button and it's frozen solid. So I had to borrow photos from the other guys who managed to get good photographs. We then got back to South Africa and recovered all the aircraft back to the squadron. Then I had some time off in preparation for my officers forming. And unfortunately, my then marriage was going south. And there was not much left to do but to try and work my way through it. I ended up in Air Force College as a flight sergeant, now no longer. Now I'm a candidate officer. So one of the things, because I just got back from Antarctica, is I didn't have much time to prepare. And I didn't read through the signal instructions correctly. I did not bring my boots with, my brown uniform, etc., etc. So I had to rush off to the stores at SLT, School for Logistics Training, and I had to go and get brand new kit. So here I've got brand new browns, brand new boots, and they tell me, get dressed, get in the bus. So we get dressed, get in the bus, and got my little car with streepies on. And off we go to do the famous Khocha. Now, Khocha is the SAAF version of Hell Week that you have for the SEALs. And there's a couple of interesting little photographs that I'm sure we could have a look at some point, where you're going through Khocha and they tell you to pitch your tent so you can sleep, and it's the middle of the night because they've been going physical training, psychological training, emotional distress, more physical training, more physical training, more physical training, and then ask you why you want to join the Air Force. All sorts of stuff. And we're busy pitching the tents, and each one's got a pole, and they tell you to hit the ground. Now you're holding the tent up and you're lying on the ground. And then, yeah, about 2-3 o'clock in the morning, they say, no, we've got to form a snake. So you've got to grab the guy's pants in front of you, and you've got to walk right up against him, and you've got this long snake, and everybody's waddling through this bush, and we're all blindfolded. And right in the beginning there, you hear one of the guys going, Cabral! Cabral! My underpants is scratching me. Man, I tell you, it's, no matter what state you were in, if you didn't laugh, then you got no sense of humor. But that snake fell from the front all the way like a ripple, all the way dominoes. Even the instructors were bursting out laughing. It was so funny. Anyway, end of Khocha. And the commanding officer, or at least the chief of the officer forming wing was Ray Bashka. And we'll talk about Ray later on, but he was a pilot, and he knew me. He looked me up and down, and he says, you are the course leader. Oh, God. Now, I've got all these 18, 19-year-old aspirant freaking pilots and junior kids out of school that know everything. And I'm a flight sergeant, now a CO, and I've got to be their daddy. It was interesting, though. Made the course and became an officer eventually. Ended up then at SLT, where I started my whole Air Force career. Because it's the School for Logistical Training, they also do the logistics officers training, where you do all your how to run a squadron type of thing, all the paraphernalia of what you need, et cetera, et cetera. So went straight into that and started my career as an Air Force officer. My whole aim to doing officer's course and getting my engineering qualifications was to do the same as your previous chatter, old Loris Person. I was set on doing a test flight course. I'd been involved in all the prototype test flights and stuff at the squadron. I was always the maintenance test engineer, always doing that. I loved tinkering in those avenues. I'd also been to be the support engineer at Kempton Park for the test flight courses there as well. Unfortunately, my mind was in a different state, and I think a lot of the ex-operators can attest to this. You know something's wrong, but you can't put your finger on it. Your brain's not functional. It's just there. And I just couldn't get the drive to understand what it is that I want to study. Stuff was going in and going right out. Where maths had been perfect for me before, I was stumped. I couldn't make head or tail of what I was doing. Anyway, I ended up for the interview, and who's going to interview me? Loris Person. And the bugger asks me a stupid question I couldn't answer. Needless to say, the officer commanding of TFTC pulled me one side and said to me, Steve, are you having marital problems? So I said, yes, sir. He said, Steve, I know what you are. I know what you're capable of, but this is not your time. Go and sort out your life, come back again. You are the right materials. I said to him, thank you very much for that. And I had to pack up my bags and put my tail between my legs and walk away from it. The first time I've ever really failed at anything. And it was quite a bitter pill to swallow. I was then posted to Air Force Base Langebaan as a logistics officer. Marriage on the rocks, I'm living in now, in the officer's mess. And I get a phone call. The previous Lieutenant Dempers from Bloemspruit, when I rejoined the Air Force, was now Commandant Dempers at 2 Air Depot at Air Force Base Esterplaat. He says to me, yes, short shit. I said, Commandant. He says, what you doing? So I said, no, I'm at Langebaan Weg. He says, well, get in your bloody car and come here. So I said, sir? He says, the signal's at the signal office, go fetch it. I'd been transferred from Langebaan to 2 Air Depot. And I was appointed as the Chief Technical Officer for 2 Air Depot. What's a Chief Technical Officer? Fortunately, you know, with our training being pretty complete and concise, it takes you not even a day or two to understand what it is that you've got to accomplish and then set out your objectives, get your vision, get your mission, set your goals and standards, and your processes are gone. So I've managed to get that up and running pretty well. The Chief Technical Officer assumes a lot of roles, of which Director of Quality is one, and a numerous bunch of other functionalities as well. Really, really interesting to get into the depot side of the Air Force. Manufacturing, overall repair, new projects, and so on. A lot of interesting factors that I managed to get involved in. And working for Fluffy Dempers was an absolute blessing. The man is a wealth of knowledge and someone I'll always look up to for the rest of my life. And all of a sudden, Chris Trubel, who's now officer commanding of 30 Squadron, I think it had already become 22 Squadron, they amalgamated. He phones Fluffy Dempers and says, he's running short of flight engineers. Can Fluffy spare me for one more trip? So Fluffy calls me in and says, I've noticed that you're having a bit of struggles. You need some time away. And it was like a blessing because my mind was not functioning the way it should. I don't know if I was distraught over my wrecked marriage or if I was having withdrawal symptoms from not being able to go up to the border again, or I had no idea what was wrong with me. And I was very happy to take the trip. And I was on my way back down to Antarctica again, this time with Les Besaidnout and a friend of mine, Henny Stein. We ended up initially arriving at Sanai, or the Bukta, the area before the main base. Main base is still about another 20, 30 kilometers inland. And we were flying SEAL sorties. We had a lot of marine biologists and so on board, and they were doing SEAL counts to see what the population was like, looking at leopard seals, Weddell seals, et cetera, et cetera. And the hydraulic pump on the aircraft was leaking, and the hydraulic pump was mounted just above the alternator. The alternator's got a splash plate, but unfortunately, the splash plate can only deflect certain amounts. And the hydraulic fluid ended up in the alternator and blew the alternator. Now, the J model, because it's got anti-icing and de-icing systems, has got a bigger alternator, much bigger alternator than the standard Puma. So we only had one more left. So we swapped out the alternator, and as true as Bob, didn't last more than a couple of flights, and it blew as well. So the last alternator we had was a military Puma alternator, which is a lower amperage, a lower wattage actually, a 65 kilowatt compared to 45. And I thought, no, we can't do this anymore. So I pulled out the hydraulic pump and I swapped the hydraulic pump on the aircraft, and blessers turned to fly. So they got into the aircraft and they weren't even gone 20 minutes, they were back. The hydraulic pump that I put in was overpressuring, which means the pressure relief valve built into the hydraulic pump itself was stuck. And they said, oh, we screwed, we can't fly. So I said, guys, come on, come on. They said, well, we can't open up the hydraulic pump. This is something that only Denel Aviation can do. I said, no, Bull, that's nonsense. I looked at the schematics, I looked at the maintenance manuals, I looked at the repair manuals, and I said, I'll fix it. So I took the hydraulic pumps down into the engine room, got myself a dust-free environment, laid down some cloths, and I stripped the leaking pump, put her apart, lay her down. I stripped the overpressurizing pump and put her down. I said, okay, here's the seal. So that's the leaking part. So let me mate the good seal with the good working pump. Then I'll have a good hydraulic pump. So the overpressurizing one we'll put back in and we'll send it for repair when we get back. Put the three together, and there was vehement opposition by the engineering fraternity that, oh, we can't do that, it's unsafe. So I said, no. I will run the aircraft on the back of the Agulhas on the deck for 3 hours to validate that it's okay. Whine, moan. Okay, fine, never mind. So I went to the chief pilot. I said, salute Low, actually. I said, Martin Low, listen, can you come and sit in the cockpit with me so the two of us can validate that what I've done is actually working. Started the aircraft up, boom, beautiful, all in the green. So 30 minutes go by. He says, Steve, we can shut down. I said, Tim, no, I just got a point to prove here. He says, what? I said, no, those two there. When I pointed those two there, Bless gave me a dirty look and he just walked away. Any Stein was starting to nod his head. Yeah, and that was fine. I mean, he's a good lad, absolute star in his. And we ran it for close on 3 hours, shut the aircraft down and continued the flying. Aircraft was perfect again. So managed to rescue that sortie because there's no other way of getting spares down to Antarctica unless you chuck them out of a freaking C-130 or a Boeing. I mean, what's the chances of that, eh? At this point in time, my parents had also moved down to Cape Town and they were looking after Nicole, who decided to come and live with Daddy now, which is really a blessing in disguise. I'd bought a new home, sold the other one, and got a home closer to her school. So she was able to go to school and back, and my parents were able to look after her. So while I'm on this long trip, Nicole has at least company. Her mother did take her away for a while, etc. On the trip, we also go and review the progress of the new base being built on the mountains, a place called Feslas Cafet. It's built right on the edge of the cliff so that there could be no snow pack-up build-up behind the base because the wind blows the snow. Whatever stops it from going further, it builds a mountain behind it. So now the mountain is a cliff and it falls off the cliff, so no problem. It was quite interesting. I actually videotaped this whole sortie with Henny and myself walking around there. And at that point in time, we got a call from the Norwegians near their base, just about an hour and a half away, is flying. And they were in dire straits. Their ship was stuck in the ice and they couldn't offload because they normally come right up against the side of the ice shelf and then offload onto the ice shelf, and they couldn't get close. Now, the J model Puma is quite a strong machine. And we managed to lift we lifted everything off their vessels, their vehicles, everything. We offloaded them in less than 3 hours. We offloaded the ship, bang, 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 done. At the same time, one of the chaps, one of the Norwegians, had developed a breathing problem. If you breathe cold air in very, very severe conditions like that, you actually get a hole in the lung. And he'd got a hole in his lung, and this was venting into his chest cavity. So we took him with us back to Sinai, where the doctor at the Sinai base, with a very, very well-kitted hospital area, actually treated him and got him sorted. Back at Sinai now, it is initiation for first-timers. So all the first-timers, now we're going to have half of the Air Force crew, all first-timers. And the Sinai team, the guys that had been there for a year already, they head this thing up. And you go through all sorts of rituals, etc., etc. And one of them is to suck the Spanish arsehole. Now, the Spanish arsehole is sounds very disgusting, but what it does is more. It's a mug in the form of a woman's breast. And you think that this would be really entertaining and erotic, but it's filled with tequila and Tabasco sauce. More Tabasco sauce than tequila. And if you're sucking on something because you can't drink it one shot, it burns like crap. So needless to say, there was a bunch of guys sucking the Spanish arsehole and not having a good time about it. Then I also got bored, and when you're bored, you start doing the unthinkable, and I built an igloo. After sufficient sustenance, de-icing fluid, you decide you're brave enough to go sleep in your igloo. Well, it lasted for about 3 hours. And then we had to go back for more sustenance and climb into our beds. So that wasn't very interesting. Then it's time to leave. It's probably the longest trip we've done. We left towards the end of March. And it was full nighttime by the time we left, the very, very limited daytime. And busy loading the ship up again. So we've got all the old diesel engines and all the rubbish that's going to be taken back to South Africa. And the guys were hooking up at the bottom are all the old ex-Sinai guys doing their last work for the year. One of the diesel engines, you've got 2 screw points where you screw in the eye hooks, and then you put a cable through that, and then that they will go into the aircraft, and we pick it up and fly it off. And came in, hooked up. Funny was still my pilot. Took the string, and as we started moving forward, the engine broke away, and that jerk on the cargo sling broke the cargo sling off the bottom of the main gearbox. So the 2 eyelets that were holding the cargo sling in broke away. I grabbed the pole, and the engine fell away, and I got with the cargo sling in my hand. So we landed, pulled the cargo sling in, inspected the gearbox, everything was still okay. And then we continued to load up the stuff into the aircraft and then completed the thing. But being a technical officer now, I have to write a report. So I did an investigation. I went down to where the engine was that we dropped, because we did pick it up eventually. And what had happened, there was ice in the threads, and the guy hadn't put the thing completely in. It was on in about 1.5 threads. And as we took the sling, that thread broke out. And that's what created the thrust and broke the cargo sling. So anyway, damaged Hotel Juliet Alpha's gearbox, but the aircraft was still flyable, and we managed to get everything onto the vessel and set sail to go and drop off all the weather buoys along the way. So you go down South Sandwich Islands, and then you start coming back towards South Africa as the waves are now blowing this way. So you don't hit them and roll, you're actually going up and down and pitching. We also managed to stop off at Gough Island, and we spent a day on the island and just introducing those who'd never been there before to the island, which was quite interesting. Got back to South Africa and assumed my duties again as Chief Technical Officer. Single life and a father. Interesting life. You've got to learn to adjust. Needless to say, brain was not in the right place. But I got called away on the Tafelberg to go and do a little sortie, a couple of days on board the ship. And just relaxed a bit, got back to the squadron and decided I need a break. I got onto the road and I actually just decided to hitchhike in the direction. I ended up at my aunt's place in Legauri in Johannesburg, and just nobody seems to understand who you are or what you are. You talk about something, then you're either a racialist, and the more you try and tell the people, but my best friends are black people. They operate with me. They're my brothers. The less they understand. And it was a wasted exercise. Anyway, I walked into a motorcycle shop and I said, I bought myself a Suzuki 750 GS. Got into the back of this thing and just set sail. Ended up in Zimbabwe. And I was riding around Harare, and I thought, what are you doing here? And just realized that I'm not setting an example of being a parent. I need to pull myself together. I immediately set sail back again, and I rode nonstop, just for fuel, all the way back down to Cape Town. And along the way, had a couple of interesting discussions with myself. Needless to say, long tears and long mind exercises to try and establish some type of sanity. Back in Cape Town, things started to stabilize, started to normalize. Managed to go out and do things. Took a couple of ladies out for, I suppose that's what we do. And once again, the squadron approached me and asked, we need an engineer for a quick trip to Marion Island. There's some technical issues they need resolved, but both J models were out of service. They were being maintained. So I took a military Puma, went down to Marion Island, quick trip down there and back. Nice breakaway. You don't have the daily communication, and a lot of thinking time, You know, the come to Jesus stuff. Come, Steve, you, me, and Jesus. We're going to have a discussion. And eventually, some monkey or freaking general thing decides that I can get promoted. So now I'm some Captain Coetzee. My God, can you believe it? Anyway, Captain Coetzee is called to attend a parade. And one decoration that I'm very proud of because of the team that was involved. A number of us were awarded the Air Force Cross for our efforts on the recovery of the 3 aircraft on the Antarctic Plateau. I'm very proud of the team I worked with. I'm proud of our efforts, and I cannot emphasize how strong people are when they work as a team together to achieve a common goal. And really, really, really proud of those people. Fluffy Dempus saw something in me that I didn't see, and he promoted me to the C-47 turbodeck system manager. We were decentralized from Air Logistics Command, which was the system management functionality for the whole Air Force. We actually decentralized down to Cape Town. And we assumed the system management for the new TurboDAX and the soon-to-be Pilatus Astra trainer aircraft. So it was a double whammy. We'd established such a phenomenal manufacturing, servicing, and modification process at 2A Depot under Fluffy's leadership that it was a no-brainer to make 2A Depot the system management environment for them. I assumed a heck of a lot of responsibilities in this position, and my life was starting to change. Things were starting to happen for me. I met the most wonderful woman that I've ever been introduced to, the indelible Annie. Now, Annie, still with me today as my wife, actually, have built a fantastic life together. She recognized the bullshit and said, sort your life out, but you're staying with me. And she has. Through thick and thin, she has stuck with me. What a wonderful woman. Absolutely lovely person. Back at 2 Depot, Russell Dupree actually approached me, the late Russell. Sad state, but anyway, late Russell Dupree approached me and said to me, Steve, can you please do a quick trip for us to Queenstown? We were doing the integration with the MK forces. They were now entering into the Air Force, into the armed forces, etc., under the new National Defence Force. And there was still a lot of terrorism between the various old states, Botswana and all those places, or Botswana. Anyway, I was deployed to Queenstown. I arrived there to take over an aircraft that was maintained by the previous flight engineer. And when I got there, I looked at the aircraft. Oh my gosh, it was in a filthy state, absolutely filthy state. So the first thing I said to the guys was, look, I'll see you later. No, we'll come help you. I said, no, don't worry, just leave me alone. Go away. And I had to replace the main rotor blade tapes. They were torn to shreds. The aircraft was incredibly dirty. I had to wash it down. There was grease in areas that I didn't see. There was oil under the engine platforms. So I cleaned the whole damn aircraft up because, a dirty aircraft, you can't see if there's something wrong with it. A clean aircraft, the moment it leaks, you'll see it. One moment something goes wrong, you'll pick it up. So I cleaned the aircraft, got it ready, and we take off on our first sortie. And old Donnie Smuts is sitting there, and the co-pilot sitting there. Captain. Interesting scenario. Who's in charge? Captain. But it worked out beautifully. 3 captains in an aircraft. We had a wonderful tour. And we ended up on a call out. The guy said, please come to pick up a captive. We had to arrest one of our officers. He went bonkers last night and started threatening people with a weapon and so on. So we blocked him up and we want to take him back for trial in Queenstown. So we flew up towards the Drakensberg and we ended up in the most atrocious weather where we basically had to try and feel our way to this army camp. Anyway, weather did eventually clear up a bit, made it into the camp, landed, went to meet the commanding officer, major chap, had a chat with him, and he said, no, one of the integration forces from MK was now a lieutenant there, and this guy had too much to drink the night before. And he obviously pulled a weapon and started threatening people and firing with a couple of rounds and so on. So they arrested him and put him in the barracks over there. So I grabbed the guy, and Donnie Smith says, "Oh, okay, but do you need help?" So I said, "No, you guys don't want to see this." So I took the young lad with me, still pretty drunk at this point in time. And I just read him the riot act. I said to him, "This is, you know, that briefing that I gave, this is my cat. I'll stroke the cat as I want to. Don't stand or crap and puke on my seats or else, you know." So I made it very clear to him that if he pukes in my aircraft, he's going to suffer. So I don't care where you puke, but you don't puke in my aircraft. Then the next thing, if I hear a word out of you during this flight, I'm going to open the door and I won't hear you anymore. And Donnie and co-pilot rolled up, we started up, and I put the guy right at the back of the Puma where we have nice motion. Now, any of you who've flown in a Puma before knows you want to puke, you go sit at the back. Okay. So we flew him back to Queenstown, and he was trying to come forward, and I just pointed my finger at him. And then he started getting a little bit aggressive. So I unplugged my bone dome, and I went and helped him write to make him understand I was being serious. And he plugged in. The guy said, "Is it all right?" He said, no, have a look. He's fine. So he's sitting back in his little corner, and he'd done that and emptied his insides into his stomach. Needless to say, when we got to Queenstown, the military police were there. They arrested him. And apparently he was put in barracks and dishonorably discharged as well. Not a pleasant situation, but something like that you've got to nip in the bud straight away. Back at Tue Depot, as system manager, things were going perfect. I'd actually, for my test flight course, I bought myself a desktop computer. Now, if I don't know, any of you remember in those days, computers were, "Oh, what is that?" And I'd actually, in the first week I bought this thing, formatted it about 40 times. So I taught myself how to operate it. And fortunately, by the time I was at Tue Depot, I was pretty fluent in DOS, MS-DOS, and basic programming, and I could operate most of the programs. I was very good at developing formats and things. And I put all the manufacturing instructions and all the special operating procedures on disk, and started readdressing the way that we do the configuration control board, you know, change management at Tue Depot, and introduced a flight certification process for manufacturing equipment, etc. So I was really getting into the thick of things and making a difference, making it better for the depot, and really making it interesting, as well as repeatable, copy paste. Because if you've got a process, anybody can follow it. If you don't have a process, then people are going to suck your brain dry. Then I did a quick trip again to the SA Tafelberg. And the executive officer of the Tafelberg, once again, knew me pretty well. And we're 3 captains on board an aircraft. So we land on board the SS Tafelberg, and EXO turns to the commander and says, "Hey, you guys, there's snacks for you in the wardroom, which is the officers' mess on board a ship." He says, "Oh, in flight, the warrant will take you down for snacks there in the warrant's mess." So I said to him, "No, it's okay." So I turned around and I said to the pilot, "Just I'll see you guys in the wardrooms now, you know. I'm just going to quickly install the cargo sling and get everything sorted out." So the warrant comes up and he wants to grab my kit, and he looks up at me like that, and he leaves it again. He says. So after I've installed the equipment, I grab my kit and I go walking up to the wardroom. And I walk into the wardroom. The EXO looks up and he says to him, "May F vlug, jy's 'n kaptein," which translates to, "My captain, a flight, you're a captain." needless to say, I got free drinks for quite a while that night, and we had an interesting trip. At this point in time, Annie and I's relationship was just getting better and better. We started the right way. I always loved telling people this. And I was such a difficult son of a bitch and very resistant to change. Didn't have much time for women anymore. And we fought like cat and dog right through our beginning of our relationship. Today, if we say a bad thing to each other, it's impossible. We fought out right at the beginning. So you start it that way, you'll always end up good, no matter what. You can make it through those first tumultuous periods of fighting, you're going to have a good relationship. At this point in time, another interesting story was that Pilatus Astra were building aircraft and then shipping them semi-built to Air Depot, where we would assemble them and then include the South African avionics suite into the aircraft, and then we would test fly them and release them to the flight training school. And Fluffy loves testing people. This is one good thing about Fluffy. He likes testing people. And my mood swings like this, I still didn't quite understand what was really transpiring in this brain of mine. But anyway, I stripped my moor. I lost my rag with Fluffy. At this point, he was a colonel and I was a captain. And I used to come to work with my motorcycle, XSL 1100 Yamaha. And I saw his car was still there. It was past 4:15 in the afternoon. Base closed 4:15. And I saw his car still there. So I thought, now stop that. I went and had a discussion with him. So I walk in and I let him know I'm unhappy about a decision he made, etc. So he looks up at me, he says to me, Steve, what's your existence right here at Air Depot? So I said, well, I'm the system manager and also a program manager for the production line of the aircraft, system manager to incorporate all the system management activities. He says, no, that's not it. What is your existence right here at Air Depot? I said, what are you talking about, Colonel? He says, your existence right here is to make me look good. I strip my moor. I grab my rank. I throw it down on the table. Now, Fluffy Dempers is about 6'2". Me at my best, I'm 5'4". Now, I want to address this colonel. And when I start stuttering, then and I got spittle here, then I'm more beyond. Then I'm so angry, I can't even freaking talk to myself. I'm so angry. So he says to me, Steve, just sit down, just sit down. So I'm still, and he says, you see that bottle of schnapps over there that the Swiss have brought over? There's 2 glasses there, pour us a schnapps each. So I pour a schnapps, but it's like spilling the stuff all over the place. And I give him one, I take one, flatten it. He says to me, let me explain to you now. I have to explain this to you. Your existence right here is to make me look good, because when I'm gone entertaining clients, playing golf, talking to the senior staff, away on trip, etc., you are functionally running the system management environment. Okay? You're running the important part that's making us what we are. Do you need me there? I said, no, sir. He said, so do I have to do anything? No, sir. He said, have you absorbed and accepted enough? I said, yes, sir. You taught me what I needed to be. So in other words, I have given you the ability to be what you are and thereby making me look good. Am I right? I said, can we have another dop, sir? We flattened that bottle of schnapps. And anyway, I still have the greatest respect for Fluffy Dempers. He's an awesome leader. Awesome leader. Now, at this point in time, obviously somebody thought that I was worth training and that there should be an Air Force career for me. So they sent me on a staff course. So I'm back at Air Force College, now learning how to manage a business, how to run a squadron, how to run a depot, etc., etc. Very interesting. You know, a lot of people equate it to doing a MBA. It's a similar type of training. And you obviously, because you're running the business, you get certain areas of concern that you got to. And we were given the pub. Now, at Air Force College, there was, I still don't know if it exists today, there's a rondavel with a traffic light outside, and that is owned by the course. And that's the pub, okay? We took over the pub. At this point, we still had the integrated states, and the President Mongopi's aide-de-camp was a major, a black chap by the name of JC. And JC and I became very good friends. And in fact, I gave him a lot of guidance on the course, and he passed very, very well, actually. I'm very proud of him. But during the course, I'm a shit stirrer. That's all I can say. You remember the dead end story from part 1? Well, JC walks in one night, and I knew I'm going to catch these guys. There were 3 of the integrated states black guys there. And obviously all the storemen and the non-operational type guys have no idea what dead ends is. So I'm waiting for everybody ready, and I scream dead ends. And those that know are back on their back, their hands and legs in the air with their drinks. And JC looks at me like this. He says, "Steve, what are you doing?" So I said, "No, we're playing dead ends." I said, So he says, "What's dead ends?" I explain the rules to everybody, and we carry on playing dead ends. Man, everyone has fun. And this was the story backwards and forwards. And then one evening, JC walks in. He used to drink Amstel lager. Loved his Amstel lager. But he would only have one. So JC walks in and he says to me, "Steve, 1 beer, please." So I thought, sure. So I took it and I poured it into a glass, and I took some nice stuff and I rubbed it around the rim of the glass and I gave it to him. And JC took a swig and he got another swig, and I thought, now he's drinking this thing. So he's finished it and he says, "Can I have another one?" So I gave him another one. I did the same trick and he finished it. And our JC was starting to look worse for wear. Then I had to own up, and I told him what I did to his drink. He says, "Aye, Steve." Anyway, the beautiful Annie was invited to join us on the last formal dinner of the evening. And she spent a couple of days with me at the rondavel. And it was quite an interesting scenario. Gary Ramage, who I'm sure when he hears this will also remember very clearly, where him and I were dressed in our beautiful mess dress. And we walk in, it's a nice winter's evening actually. The ladies are dressed to the T, beautiful. And they're standing on the opposite side. We get our sherry, and we're having a sip. And Gary and I walk over to the fireplace. And we'd been doing the garlic thing and freaking all sorts of steak and stuff like that. And that creates what? Wind. Where does wind go? It comes out the back. What does it smell like? It smells like shit. So Gary lifts his leg and he goes, "Wow." So I said, "No, that's nothing. Listen to this one." And I give a long ladder. Wow. Man, and that green cloud sort of comes waffling up like that. And just then, the ladies walk over, and because we just done it, we walked away. And as the ladies stood there and they started turning up their noses, the general and his staff came walking past. And that waffle must have got their noses as well. Needless to say, Gary and I got it from the ladies that night. Anyway, so Annie joined me on the drive back to Cape Town, and we stopped over in the eastern coast at a good friend of mine. And we spent a week there with him and his wife and family, and had a lovely time together. Sort of really enjoyed getting to do the arts with the lady. Went down to Cape Town, and our relationship progressed from there onwards. She moved in, and her son at that point in time was at boarding school, little terror. Freaking wanted to wring his neck every now and again, but David is a good boy. He's a good boy. He's turned out to be an awesome father. His young son is going to be a year old in a couple of weeks. Back at Tue Depot, system manager, and I'm managing a whole number of contracts as the system manager. One of them is being the development of technical publications, and I head up the project. Well, I own the project, and there's a number of interactions into this project, namely Air Logistics Command from One Air Depot, LogTech itself, and then the publications, Air Force publications environment, etc., from ARL Command. And there's a whole entourage of senior ranking officers, contract holders, subcontractors, etc., gathering of probably about 30 people. So I fly up in civilian attire, in the suit from Cape Town to Johannesburg, get picked up there by LogTech, the subcontractor, and they drive me through to Midrand, where we have the meeting. Obviously, my flight was delayed, so I was late. There's all these people sitting. I walk in late, and then I walk in, chair the meeting, and I call to order, and I immediately crap everyone out for not being forthcoming with all the actions that were overdue, etc. And I can be quite an arsehole if I want. And to me, in such an environment, rank has got no structure. Yeah, if you don't do the job, then you don't deserve to be there, type of thing. So I quickly set the record straight, get the people sorted, get what we need to do to get the contracts back on track again. I have limited time, and I also need to get things sorted. And after the meeting, the late Nestor Moelman, who was the CEO of LogTech, called me one side. He said, "Steve, can I buy you some lunch?" I said, "Yeah, I can eat." And we proceed out to a restaurant there somewhere in Midrand, and he makes me a job offer. At this point in time, Annie and I and the kids had already started looking around. We didn't like what we had seen with respect to where the country was going. And we were investigating opportunities elsewhere. What he'd offer was astronomical, absolutely astronomical. I said I would think about it, got back, and Fluffy is my boss. I've got to talk to Fluffy. And I walk in, sit down with Fluffy, says, "Yeah, Nestor's already spoken to me." Oh, God. There goes my surprise. He says, "Steve, you've got a career carved out already. The Air Force wants you as Chief Staff Logistics. That's where they're grooming you to go. That means that you'll be a general within the next 5 years." So I said, "I understand, sir." He says, no, I'm not trying to convince you. I'm just telling you, your career has already been carved. But if I was given the same opportunity today, I would do what you're thinking of doing. And that was my mindset. We applied for immigration to Canada with a second option to New Zealand, and left it at that. In all honesty, I was already 40 years of age. You don't know. I've never been outside of the country besides, flying over strange countries and throwing bullets at them and all that type of stuff. But I've never been overseas. I've never been to Europe. I've never been to the Americas or anywhere else. Only places I've gone is Antarctica and Mauritius and Madagascar, and I haven't gone anywhere else. Needless to say, you filed it and did all my documentation myself, followed everything through, did all the translations of everything, had them certified, etc., and approached a company to process the documentation, which after 6 months they screwed up. So I went, collected everything and did it myself. So I paid them an astronomical amount of money to do nothing, and processed all my documents and submitted, and ended up being a project manager for Logtech based out of Cape Town in Diep River. And together with a very good friend of mine, who you won't believe works for me today, John Grelem. Him and I were tasked to go and do a continuous mining improvement logistic support analysis concept. In other words, looking at how do you process the supportability for a continuous mining program, which means we had to go to the bottom of the deepest mine in South Africa. So we flew up to Johannesburg and went over to one of the mines there, ended up climbing into a cage and flying down the freaking hut down into the bottom of the earth, pop out of the cage on the other side and into this strange environment. And there we're standing, taking notes and looking at this new contraption that they'd built. I'm not going to go into the detail of it, but really interesting process. And the next minute, there's this awful freaking death, loud explosion and a shake. Both of us just about crapping our pants right there and then. So we turned around and said, "What's that?" "Oh, no, that's Fricky. He was just popping a pillar." "Oh, what's popping a pillar?" "No, one of these pillars, that's good to get the rock out the way." So they just popped a pillar. Anyway, interesting scenario. We came back, we wrote up the logistic support analysis for this concept and submitted it. And I actually, at that point time broke away and solely focused on managing the contracts that I had written in the Air Force for Logtech to perform. I was now managing those contracts to deliver them to the Air Force, and got them sorted in a very good way, got things sorted out beautifully. And then I decided, as we got documentation back saying that our documentation was being processed and it's looking very promising at this point in time, I thought I'd take the family through the now Namibia, past Southwest Africa, and show them all the bases we had all along the top. And we had the most interesting trip. I took them up from Swakopmund to Walvis, from Walvis to Grootfontein, from Grootfontein right through to Ruakana, and then all the way back along on Dangwa to the Caprivi Strip, and right back down again to Grootfontein, down to Cape Town. So I gave them the full tour and experience. The kids, obviously, being children, didn't really pay much attention, but Annie made such a wonderful trip of it. And the one part of this trip I'd really like to expand on was on the way along the Caprivi Strip, I'd spent a lot of time at Buffalo, the 3-2 Battalion base. I have still to this day very, very high, greatest regard and fellowship for a lot of the 3-2 chaps, and still keep communication with them. Hi, Blackie. And we actually camped at Buffalo for a couple of days and had a wonderful, wonderful time there. Walked amongst the graves, had a look at the old buildings, and a lot of memories came flooding back. A heck of a lot of memories came flooding back. Got back to Cape Town, and I was approached by the sister company of Logtech called Pilog. And they were implementing the South African Logistic Information System called SLIS, which is the new software program for the complete MRP of all the systems that were being utilized. And I teamed up with another program director, and the two of us actually traveled from base to base implementing SLIS, which was quite a lengthy process, doing a audit of all the aircraft and their serial numbers, et cetera, and all the tasks, et cetera, translating it into an auditable process, uploading the new system, uploading the data into the new system, then doing a validation of the hard copy to what you have. And that was really interesting. Traveled far and wide. I mean, I bought myself a 540 BMW, so I was doing Mach Crit at 250 k's an hour through the Orange Free State with the damn thing. And on one of the trips, Annie met me in Durban, and we went to the Drakensberg and had a wonderful, wonderful time at one of the resorts over there, and then traveled down to Cape Town together via Bloemfontein, where we slept in the officers' mess. Very interesting. Anyway, our relationship had really developed well. Got back to Cape Town to be informed that we needed to be in Pretoria at the Canadian Embassy for an interview. At the same time, we in actual fact had the UN function for Logistics, and was put up in a beautiful resort very close to the outskirts of Pretoria. Went for our interview, and they asked me about my career and about my qualifications, and told me my age is against me and that I don't really qualify on points. So, I mean, we were, you could actually see me deflating. And the guy says, but Mr. Coetzee, that's just the basics. This interview actually qualifies you, and you'll be getting your residency permits very shortly. And that was it. We're on our way to Canada. Got back to Cape Town and said to Annie, okay, fine. I'll have to resign from Pilog now because, we don't know what's going to be happening, etc. So what I think we need to do is I need to get some money together because we don't have much. We're not going to be able to live off what I have. Air Force pension was, I have to mention this, not because it's sad, but because of how we believed in our country. For my full term in the Air Force, with everything that we'd achieved, everything that we'd done, I got 85,000 Rand as a pension. And that's not going to last very long. If you're starting in a country, at that time, the exchange rate was 5 Rand to $1. So I would have had very little money to live off. And he would sell the house. She'd sell both our BMWs. She had a 320, I had the 540. And I got a call from a good friend of mine, JC Linda. Steve, can you still start a Puma? Yeah, boss. We're helping out in the Mozambique floods in 2000. Can you come and assist? I said, I'll be there soon. I packed my bags and I had a whole bunch of wine left over from some function that I can't remember. Maybe I was inebriated, probably. Anyway, I took 2 cases of wine with me, got onto SA Airways, flew up to Johannesburg to Lorenzo Marx, Maputo, and landed there. And the customs official said to me, no, come here. I said, what's it? He says, what is these? I said, that's one for the flight crews that are helping with the rescue, the flood rescue. He says, you can't take that. I said, I beg your pardon. I said, look, I'm one of the air crew that's going to be assisting to rescue your people that are busy drowning. No, you can't bring that stuff here. I said, I'm sorry, sir, but I need, look, I tell you what do you like, white or red? I don't mind. So I said, okay, take one of each. Thank you very much. Okay, you can go now. And that was it. That's how I started my support of the floods in Mozambique. We flew far and wide for the whole period. And he came and joined us for a week. And lovely story. My pilot and I, we were flying 2 crew in the Puma at that point in time because we just didn't have enough crews to spread. And the Puma is actually can be operated by 2 people only. And we were flying along, and Annie was co-pilot. She was sitting in the co-pilot seat. Now, Annie is a proper lady. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but she's rough and tough as well. I'll tell you some interesting things about her doing hikes and garden work and stuff. She's a go-getter. So we're flying out over Sai, which was completely flooded at that point in time, and hot as hell. Man, it's summer, it is burning hot. So Anton, my pilot, decides, he says, let's go and get some cold air. So he climbs up to 10,000 feet. And we're right in the cool, and he's sitting in the co-pilot seat, and she's sitting further and further back because it looks a little bit far down to the ground. So she says, I need to pee. So I said, all right, that's no problem. When we land, you could just quickly go behind the bush there, no problem. But every time we landed near a place to drop off supplies or get things resolved, there'd be 10 million black little faces around the aircraft. The first time they've ever seen something like this. So, and he says, I said, okay, look, tell you what. We'll drop away from the place. I'll drop the curtain between the cockpit and the cabin. There's a hole in the center of the aircraft. You can use that. She says, no. This young lady squeezed her pee for 9 hours that day. She wouldn't freaking move. We got back to Maputo. Now, the potholes in Maputo roads are ridiculous. We're 6 people in a little Toyota Corolla. She's sitting on my lap, and we're bouncing along back to the hotel. She held it in till we got to the hotel and then raced through to go and have a wee. A real interesting story. I stay back in Maputo, and we continue operating all over Mozambique. We went north, we went east, we went south, we went over to the island, and we were just helping where we could. We even took David Attenborough on a tour of Zai and all those places. He came in and wanted to see what was going on. And Annie was left alone at home to sell off everything. She sold the house. I gave her power of attorney. We weren't married at this point because if we changed our marital status, we had to reapply for immigration. David had met his now wife and was totally in love. Nicole was just being Nicole, redhead herself, difficult little girl. Both teenagers, and they think they know everything. I get back a week before we leave, and JC Linda phones me and says, Steve, I want to buy a Puma, the old military Pumas, because they were phased out to be replaced by the Oryxes at that point. So I arranged that we could go and look at the Pumas at Donal Aviation, and I introduced him to the right people who do the sell-off for the Air Force. So I got back the Friday, and we were leaving for Canada on the Sunday. Young Annie had done everything by herself, everything. And one last story about young Annie. A friend of mine, Calvin Roberts, who owns a car dealership, had taken both BMWs, and he'd sold her a Toyota Corolla, old one. And he said, Annie, I'll buy it back from you when you leave for the same price that I sold it to you. just so that you guys can get going. Perfect. So she goes up to the local little shop, and she's got David in the passenger seat. She says, David, I'm just going to park here quickly. If someone comes and they want you to move the car, then just move the car. She runs into the grocer, comes out, and she's got all the goodies, and she jumps into the car, looks left. Oh, there's someone sitting in the car. So, oh, sorry, wrong car. Gets out. She got into a BMW that looked like the BMW she rode. Wrong car. Got back in, and David's wetting himself, looking at his mother getting into the wrong car. Anyway, and that was the end of our South African lives. The Sunday, we congregated, and there was a couple of friends, my late mother, come to see us off at the airport. And the next day would be Annie's birthday. So she would have a birthday for 2 solid days, because Vancouver is behind time. It's about a 9-hour difference between South Africa and Canada, which means if the world comes to an end, you can always come and visit us for a while. You'll live a bit longer. And we left for Canada that night. And that, my friends, is the end of my story as a South African, a patriot, and I loved my Air Force career. I was destined to be a career soldier, but unforeseen circumstances have given me the opportunity to afford my children a much better future, of which I'm very proud of both of them today, well settled, and they're achieving things. Chris, thank you for the opportunity to be able to talk, and really much appreciated for what you've done for us.
Well, I'm sitting here and I'm thinking to myself, what a marvelous career you did have. I mean, you went, can I say, from Mr. Action Man, and then you became more of a nerd, and you ended it as Mr. Action Man again, because I recall the 2000 floods in Mozambique. It was massive. There were pictures of you people rescuing all the locals. There was one lady, I believe, in a tree who gave birth in the tree.
That's right.
That's the episode you're talking about, that time period.
Exactly.
There were other air forces there as well, or was it only the South African?
No, it was a whole lot of commercial South African helicopter companies. This was the beginning of Starlight Aviation, actually, with the 2 J model Pumas. They bought these aircraft from the Department of Environmental Affairs because the Air Force had replaced them with 2 Oryx helicopters, which they used on in Antarctic after that. And Court helicopters was there, so it was Titan helicopters, or commercial operators. And then the Air Force provided a bunch of Oryxes as well from 19 Squadron in Pretoria. But it was all South African.
I was about to ask about that. When you would sail down to Antarctica on either Tafelberg or on Agulhas, would you have like your own cabin? Were you treated fairly well when you were not stealing food?
We on the Agulhas, you treated like a king. I mean, absolute king. Actually, on my last trip, because I was an officer, I had my own cabin. But the NCOs, we used to sleep in cabins of 4, but very comfortable, very, very comfortable. The Tafelberg was very comfortable, so was the Drakensberg. But the frigates that were taken out of service, oh my God, they were small. It's like sleeping in a floating submarine. It's really small. But the larger vessels, really comfortable.
Did you get any special training before they would take you down south so far? I mean, you can't die in that environment. I mean, it is Antarctic. It gets extremely cold there.
Yeah, everyone has a pre-trip briefing, and then on board briefings as well. So they do take a lot of attention on making sure that people are well educated. They have lost a couple of people. I mean, alcohol does strange things to people. It disengages their brains. One guy, unfortunately, went wandering out one night by himself, which is one of the no-nos. You'd never, ever leave in a wind storm or in a storm, leave the area alone. Always make sure someone's with you or someone knows where you're going so that they can follow up. And he actually ended up in a whiteout, wind-blown condition, fell over and froze to death. So there have been quite a number of those episodes.
I've heard somewhere that these northern lights, aurora or something, that can intervene with your electronics on your aircraft or on a ship. Is that true?
I wouldn't say to that extent, depending, because in the years that we really qualified, you had limited electronic interfaces. Today's aircraft are going to be much, much more affected. Yes, but you've always got backup systems. And those backup systems are what you rely on. And the interference is true, yes. It's electromagnetic interferences that take place.
Can you tell me something, Steve, about that shirt you wearing? I believe it's a logo of a 100th birthday of your...
oh, this one?
Yeah, 100th birthday of the South African Air Force.
Well, the South African Air Force is the second oldest air force in the world. And it was established next to the British Air Force, the Royal Air Force, which is the oldest. And in actual fact, the celebrations of 100 years came a couple of years back. I'm trying to think of the exact date now. But yeah, I wear it with pride because the South African Air Force was at one point in time completely self-sufficient, self-reliant, and a very credible threat to whoever was going to face us.
Yes, it was a fantastic Air Force. I mean, he had greater turnaround times, I believe, than the Israeli one. And the aircraft being able to fly was so high a ratio again. It was fantastic.
Yeah, yeah. No, the guys were very, very well trained, you know. And, I mean, I allude to the training that we had in the Air Force. A lot of our instruction manuals, etc., were the same as the Royal Air Force. You know, the pre-study materials, etc., are related to the best in the world.
Now, I've seen many, many pictures of you. I have to tell all of you here, normally when we do an interview or a conversation, I ask for a few pictures. And I got, I would say, close to 100. Fantastic pictures, by the way. I wish I could put all of them in here for you to see. But the one thing I did not see with you there, which puzzles me greatly, Steve, where were your Ray-Bans? Because I've never seen a flight crew without their dark Ray-Bans on them. What went wrong, mate?
Well, the same was Brilla, and no, actually, I was after swimming in the rivers in Lowveld as a kid. I got balazia, and after the balazia treatment, I had short-sightedness, and I wore glasses. So those photo lenses, you know, the ones that used to go dark. So I had automatic Ray-Bans, and one picture I think that I sent you with me digging in the snow. It looks like I'm wearing dark glasses. Those are the photo lenses. They used to go so dark in Antarctica. So that's all that I used to wear. But yeah, interesting.
Also, I have to take you back. I recall, I think, in the first episode, when you left the Air Force for that short time, you met that Boeing captain who took you on a flight.
Sluggy.
Yes. Did you actually qualify then as a private pilot?
Yes, I did. And I re-obtained my license here in South Africa, in Canada as well. So I got a PPL here as well.
And that must be nice for you to fly around.
Yeah, to fly is heavenly, my friend, but to hover is divine.
Cannot help but laugh about that statement. That's typical of chopper pilots. What is that song you're talking about? We are the Chopper Boys or the Chopper King?
Well, there's a couple of songs, you know. There's the one that we reminisce when we remember fallen comrades. A chopper we've in any kind of weather, you know that. So it's a very deep song. And then there's the normal chopper song, you know, the one that goes together with Dead Ants. We choppers, we long way from home. We highly bedonnet, so leave us alone. So, a couple of those.
That's really a good song. I sometimes wish we had right in the beginning when Legacy started, we had this young woman and she came on the show. Her name was Sharon, or still is. And she sang that song called the Lombard River Battle Song.
Oh, yes.
And she came on the show, and she's in the US now, she's in Texas. And I always said to Sharon, make us an Air Force or a services album, you know, because there's a lot of these songs out there which I'm surely people would love to hear again.
Yeah, for sure. I've got the words to O Chopper in the book, actually. So I've specifically put it in there for that reason.
Well, we're going to talk about the book. We're going to make another episode just about the book. I started reading it, and I must tell you people out there, it's fantastic. It's really nice to read. I enjoyed reading it. Steve was kind enough to give me a copy. And now I have to ask you, Steve, just here at the end, how was life in Canada?
You know, I've never been out of the country. It's my first time. I arrived here not knowing whether I'm going to have to start swinging spanners again. I was prepared to do whatever it takes. I needed to afford the children an opportunity. And I must admit that I was surprised to see how far advanced we as the South African community were compared to the rest of the world. There were things that we were doing that we accepted as the norm, and still to this day, in the environment that I'm working right now, the things that we would do standard as a normal operating procedure, these guys break up into separate little islands. So I was really amazed to see how easy it was to adapt here. The one thing that I have to remind everybody is us bloody South Africans speak so fast. And every time when I spoke, after we arrived here, was the Canadian would look at me like, pardon me? I had to slow down how I was speaking because I was speaking too fast for them. But the country has been incredibly good to me. I have had a lot of ups and downs, a lot of challenges. Old ghosts from the past have pushed me down. I've climbed up again. And I cannot believe, I was convinced that I would work till the day I die. And I could proudly tell you now that another year and a half and I'll be on retirement. The country has given me the opportunity to be able to create a nest egg. Starting at the age of 43, I'm actually really, really impressed with how the country has afforded us the opportunity to come out of whatever dire straits we were to be what we are today. I'm really well settled here. We've traveled the world extensively. I'm really proud to say that I've put foot on every continent in this world. I've been in Asia, Southeast Asia. I've been Europe, all over Europe. I've been to Australia. I've been to New Zealand, the whole of the South Americas. I've been everywhere. And that's all because of the job opportunities that I was afforded here. And at one point in time, I had 500,000 air miles. So I could take my wonderful wife with me. So wherever I was stuck, I spent 2 years in Indonesia. She could come and visit me. Every now and again, she would come. I went to South America for 6 months. She came and visited me there. We went to Britain together. So we've been all over the world and very, very well settled in Canada. Really very well settled here.
If you look back now And let's say there's a youngster here who would want to be a flight engineer. Would you say yes, go for it?
I would honestly say that, the way that the military looks after their people, whatever career you choose in the military can only be the right career. It's a matter of attitude. I've often reviewed our youth to what we are today and today's youth and what they're becoming. And I think percentage-wise, you had much more a positive influence on youth by those who'd gone through conscription to those who haven't. It's amazing that you can change a teenager into a man in 3 months. You don't believe it until you break someone's spirit down and rebuild them in a direction to make sense of what they need to be and get their thoughts sorted. And I can honestly tell you that today I understand if it hadn't been for that training that I'd gone through, I would never have been able to overcome PTSD. I would never have. I would have gone down the tube like many of the others that have done that before.
I have a lot of sympathy for you when you start talking about the dark days. I recall when I got out of the police, I went to become a student immediately. And working at my father's place here, like a small sheep farm. And suddenly I'm not a police sergeant anymore. I'm used to power. I glare at somebody, they listen to me. Always trouble. And now all that power is suddenly removed. And I knew that something was wrong with me. I really knew. For years I knew I'm not myself. There's something wrong. I just couldn't understand it. I mean, I'm not insane. I'm not going cookies. I'm not cuckoo or whatever. I'm not, you know what I mean? But it's just there. And then you have these constant flashbacks and then there's a big bang in you. And I suppose that's part of our lives. And the only way out of it is to look to the heavens. That's where your Savior is, and that is what will carry you.
100% agree with you, Chris. The biggest plus in my life is the ability to understand your scenario and always remember, if you move forward, then you will have a future. You'll get rocks in the way. Some of them you've got to step over, others you've got to step sideways, but you never move back. Because the moment you move back, then you've got to start afresh. And we've got one life to live. When it's done, it's done. You can't go and rewind it and say, oh, I'll go fix this or I'll move that rock. So move forward. And moving forward means that you learn every single day about yourself and the depths of despair, the challenges, the dark areas, etc. It's just a process. It's a process. I mean, you and I still have those. The other night, and he said to me, what were you dreaming about? I said, what? She says, you were screaming in your dreams and making funny noises and stuff. I said, oh, probably I was drunk. I don't know. But these things are there and you live with them. You have to live with them. You can't make it your focus. There are other more important things. The sun rises, the rain falls, the mountains are covered in snow. There's beauty all around us. Just go find it.
And I don't think wiser words were ever spoken. And I thank you for that. I'm a firm believer in the African system of grey hair. It's supposed to bring wisdom. And I see a lot of that in you service people. And I'm grateful to speak to people like you, Steve. I must tell you, I learn a lot. Sometimes I sit here and I think to myself, wow, what lives you had. And still having. It's just fantastic.
It's all about enjoying life, Chris. It's all about enjoying life, right? And that's why we're here.
And having a good wife at your side. That makes it easier.
Yeah.
Well, Internet, we've come to the end of Steve Coetzee here, but we're going to talk about his book as well, and we're going to publish that. And yes, we expect you to support it, even if a man is a rich Canadian these days. We don't mind. It's really worth it to read that book. I'm telling you, he's laughing at the background. The rest, anybody else, well, let me say it like this. For the rest of you who are listening here, you know what I'm going to say by now. You are not unimportant. Don't let people come down on you. You know, the worst things would happen to us when we got out of uniform is people laughing at us, and you could not even wear your medals in public. Suddenly you were being told you were a damn murderer. Well, you know, you were not one. And you were simply, you know, cracked down upon. And there's a lot of us who broke because of that. And I don't blame you. I myself for a long time wondered, man, am I going crazy because what these people tell me I've done is simply not true. So I'm telling you, I'm asking you, please come talk to me. Bring your story for us. Let your grandkids be proud of you. Remember the young man who stood on that parade. Remember that guy and be like him. Or be like that officer you were looking up to. The man who, you know, acted like an officer and a gentleman, and the man who was a guy who you knew you could trust. Be like that man again. And until we meet again, God bless.